Every year, thousands of unclaimed bags end up at the Unclaimed Baggage Center in Scottsboro, Alabama, where a veteran intake worker stumbles upon a beat-up seafoam green roller bag containing a child's digital camera. As he scrolls through the device's photos and videos, he uncovers a terrifying, escalating psychological mystery documenting the final unexplained moments of United Flight 702 before its disappearance over Nashville. When an enigmatic representative from the airline suddenly arrives at the facility claiming the camera, the intake worker realizes that whatever happened on that flight was never meant to be uncovered, and that he is now part of the secret. Do you know how many pieces of luggage are checked onto flights each year? I'm talking in the whole world. It's 4 billion. I'll say that again. 4 billion. And of those 4 billion, do you know how many pieces of luggage are lost, damaged, or otherwise mishandled by airline personnel in the good old US of A? 2 million. Won't repeat myself again, but that's still a lot. And while most of those suitcases and rollers are eventually reunited with their rightful owners, there's still over 20,000 pieces of luggage that go unclaimed each year. Not to mention bags left on buses, on trains, in taxis, or hotel rooms. Okay, last question. Where do you think all that lost luggage ends up? Most folks couldn't tell you, but when you're a kid growing up in northeastern Alabama, you know exactly where it goes. The Unclaimed Baggage Center. Around Scottsboro, we just call it unclaimed baggage. Every year, thousands of customers pass through our doors looking for deals on clothes, electronics, jewelry, and just about anything else you can imagine. Before any of that stuff reaches the sales floor, though, it comes through us. I work in intake. When a truckload comes in, we're the first people to touch it. We unload the bags, log them, sort them, and decide what can actually be sold. Most bags are boring. Sure, you'll get the occasional wedding dress or taxidermied squirrel, but really it's just lots of clothes and chargers. I say most bags because some bags get flagged, not because of drugs or illegal contraband, but because they contain things no one can explain. Ask anybody in intake, they'll have a story. My friend Tammy found a passport from a country that doesn't exist. The Republic of Veer, complete with an official seal and flag. Cody swears on his mama that the exact same blue Samsonite shows up every year around Christmas. Not just the same model, but the exact same suitcase with the same cracked handle, the same missing wheel, and the same 4-leaf clover sticker peeling off the side. Last year it was full of ladies' wigs. The year before, empty picture frames. Cody's a nut, though. He moved away after the thing with the postcards. My story? My story started with Flight 702. Well, it started with a suitcase, actually. I didn't find out about the flight until later. It was July. Humid. The kind of Alabama weather where your shirt is sticking to your back before you even finish your morning coffee. I was working the receiving dock when the delivery truck backed into Bay 4. The driver, Trey, was a buddy from back in the day and unfortunately an Auburn fan. While we unloaded, I took the opportunity to remind him the Tigers didn't stand a chance against Bama that year. Then I rolled the first pallet of suitcases inside into the cool fluorescent-lit warehouse. For each bag, the process was always the same. Assign a lot number, slap a barcode sticker on the side, and line it up all nice and pretty-like for the sorting tables. And that's what I was doing when I noticed the bag. It was a roller. Seafoam green. Looked like a kid's bag. I'd seen a million of those, but what really caught my eye was the condition it was in. It looked like it had been dropped from orbit and used as a punching bag by a grizzly bear. Deep structural gouges ran all the way down the polycarbonate shell. The fabric trim was singed, and dark rusted-colored stains coated the wheel assemblies. Now, airlines damage luggage all the time, conveyor belts can be brutal, but this wasn't that. This bag had survived a catastrophe. I tried the zipper, but the metal teeth were crusted shut by whatever rusted substance had coated the wheels. Grabbing the heavy-duty shears from my workstation, I busted a new seam through the nylon lining and pried the clamshell open. At first, the contents looked like standard-issue kids' vacation fare. Paperbacks, folded pajamas, a fleece blanket, a stuffed unicorn with a silver horn, and a camera. A cheap-looking unicorn-themed digital camera, to be exact, encased in protective pink rubber. I pressed the power button, held my breath, and watched with mild surprise as the tiny LCD screen flickered to life with a cheerful chime. You might think I was being nosy, and that's fair, but you'd be amazed how many times we're able to reunite an unidentifiable bag with its owner, because of some tiny detail in a family photo or a full name scribbled inside a coloring book. Plus, let's be honest, I am nosy. I began clicking through the image gallery. The first photo showed a young girl smiling a gap-toothed smile straight into the lens, looking couldn't have been more than 8 years old, her eyes bright with excitement. The next shot, taken from the back seat of a moving car, framed a middle-aged couple in the front seats with their eyes focused tightly on the highway ahead. The mom looked stressed and exhausted, while the dad looked completely lost in navigation. The next 3 frames were blurry captures of nothing in particular. A sneaker on floorboards, a passing interstate billboard, the upholstered roof of the car. But the 6th picture was of an airport departure curb. The girl stood next to an old sedan loaded with suitcases, her unicorn backpack slung jauntily over one shoulder while a massive, glass and concrete terminal loomed behind her. She looked almost impossibly happy. "Geez," a voice boomed right beside my ear. It was Brian, one of the seasonal intake hires, leaning over my shoulder and striking a ridiculous, exaggerated pose for the camera. He had already earned a reputation around the facility as a complete goofball who never took the workflow seriously. I pantomimed snapping a photo of him, clicked the button, and then looked down at the digital display with a deadpan shake of my head. "Sorry, man. Screen says too ugly. Error 404. Brian let out a dry laugh before his gaze dropped to the battered seafoam green roller at my boots. "Whoa, what happened to that thing? Did it go through a wood chipper or fall off a luggage train at 70 miles an hour? I shrugged. "Tell me about it," and watched as Brian turned and headed back toward the loading bay to grab his own pallet of freight. With the dock quiet again, I turned my attention back to the tiny screen. The girl was inside the airport now. There was a wide shot of the ticketing counter, the glowing amber departure screens, and one of a stern TSA agent at the security checkpoint that made me chuckle under my breath. The next photo was a wide framing of the entire family sitting together at their departure gate, likely taken by a kind fellow passenger. The girl was still beaming with that same contagious smile, while her parents wore the relieved, deep-breathing expressions of working folks who had finally cleared security and were ready to start their vacation. In the background, crisp and clear above the boarding desk, the digital display monitor read, "United 702 Orlando." I figured they were heading down to Disney World. That certainly explained the kids' electric enthusiasm. The following pictures documented the family's journey down the carpeted jet bridge, stepping past a tall, blonde flight attendant wearing striking red lipstick who greeted them at the cabin door, and finally settling into their seats near the tail of the aircraft. Wait a second. My thumb hovered over the toggle controls. I scrolled back 3 frames to the wide picture at the gate. Flight 702. The number tugged violently at something deep in the back of my brain, like an alarm bell ringing behind a closed door. I had heard that specific flight number before, and not in a good context. Just then, the squeak of pallet jack wheels announced Brian's return with a fresh load of battered hard cases. "Hey, Brian," I called out, my voice suddenly tighter than I intended. "Yeah, what's up?" he asked, wiping sweat from his forehead with the back of his sleeve. "Flight 702. Does that mean anything to you? Ring any bells?" Brian stopped his jack, furrowed his brow, and scratched the back of his neck. "Pretty sure that was the Orlando flight from Chicago or Detroit a while back." "What Orlando flight?" I pressed, stepping closer to his pallet. He looked at me with a sobering, serious expression that stripped away his usual goofy demeanor. "The one that vanished over the mountains. The one they never found." A cold wave of adrenaline washed down my spine, chilling the humid warehouse air instantly. "Hey man, you alright? You look like you just saw a ghost," Brian said, stepping forward. "Yeah," I stammered, my chest tightening as I carefully set the rubberized camera down on my metal work table. Just need a little air. Too stuffy in here today." I turned and walked toward the loading dock doors, my pace quickening into a near jog as 1,000 chaotic thoughts raced through my head. The moment I cleared the concrete threshold and felt the heavy, hot Alabama breeze, I pulled my smartphone from my pocket and typed United Flight 702 into the search bar. The archived news headlines from 3 years ago instantly flooded my screen, each one heavier than the last. United Flight 702 disappears off radar near Nashville. FAA and NTSB launch massive search in Cumberland region. No trace of aircraft or 238 passengers found after months of scanning. My knees felt weak against the concrete loading dock. That little girl. Her parents. All those people sitting in that cabin. They were all gone. Vanished without a trace. And then a secondary realization hit me, one that made the industrial warehouse behind me feel suddenly impossibly dangerous. If the plane was never found, what in God's name was their checked bag doing here in Scottsboro, Alabama? I stumbled back inside and tracked down my floor supervisor, Shelley, in the employee break room, where she was aggressively futzing with the industrial coffee maker. "Hey, Shell," I said from the doorway, gripping the plastic doorframe to keep my hands from shaking. "Go for Shell, what's broken now?" she replied without turning around. "Is there, like, a standard operating protocol or some kind of intake procedure for when we get luggage from?" I trailed off, my throat dry. She finally turned around, coffee scoop in hand, her eyebrows knitted together in frustration. "The heck you trying to say, boy? Use your words." "From plane accidents," I spat out quietly, leaning closer. "For when we receive recovered bags from flights that went down or disappeared." She stared at me for a long, agonizing moment, as if I had just spoken to her in ancient Greek. "We don't," she said flatly. "Never." I asked. "Not in the 17 years I've been running this floor," she stated, her tone dropping into an authoritative register. "The federal government and the NTSB hold on to any forensic debris or recovered personal effects indefinitely. Why are you asking me this right now?" I forced a dry, unconvincing laugh, rubbing the back of my neck. "Nothing, just watching some true crime documentary last night. Weird thing to be curious about, I guess." I walked back to my workstation on the warehouse floor, desperately trying to convince myself that I was jumping to absurd conclusions, that I had misread the flight number on the gate screen, or that the family had taken a different connecting flight at the last minute. But when I reached table 4, the pink rubber camera was still sitting right where I had left it, resting atop the singed nylon of the seafoam green bag. Before my logical brain could stop my thumb, I pressed play on the subsequent file. The girl was inside the cramped aircraft lavatory now, holding the camera at arm's length to record herself in the mirror. She waved her free hand playfully at her own reflection, then flipped the lens around to focus on the stainless steel toilet bowl. She pushed the vacuum flush button. The air whooshed violently with that distinct, deafening aircraft suction, and she laughed aloud, thoroughly entertained by the sheer noise of it. My hands were shaking so visibly now that the tiny screen trembled in my palms. Watching these intimate, mundane final moments of a family's life play out on a 2-inch toy display felt like trespassing on sacred ground. A deep, irrational urge swelled inside me. I wanted to scream *stop. Get off the plane. * at the screen. As if by some miracle of physics my voice could reach back through the digital memory and change the timeline. The next video clip picked up immediately outside the lavatory door. The girl pushed the folding panel open and stepped out into the rear galley area, moving toward the main cabin aisle, when a harsh, wet, rattling cough drew her lens toward the jump seats. It was the same tall, blonde flight attendant from the boarding gate, the one with the bright red lipstick. She was sitting hunched over in her harness, her posture collapsed, clutching a thick bundle of paper towels tightly against her mouth. "Are you okay, ma'am?" the little girl asked, her voice dropping into a sweet, genuine tone of concern. The flight attendant flinched, looked up quickly, and forced a practiced, professional smile that didn't quite reach her strained eyes. "Yes, sweetheart, I'm totally fine," the woman replied, her voice strangely raspy and thin. "Just a little bit of dry cabin air catching in my throat. Do you like chocolate milk? Our beverage service is going to be starting in just a few minutes." The girl must have nodded enthusiastically, because the flight attendant's smile softened. She gave a reassuring nod, and the recording cut out.